Hey guys, today I am bringing you another comic book reviews video, and it's been a while since I've done one of these, so I'm a little bit rusty, so bear with me as I share my thoughts on some of the recent comic books that I've read. Also, I'm wearing a DC shirt today, and I'm not going to be talking about any DC comics, so don't hate on me! Please! Please don't hate me. First up, I read Avengers Arena Murder World Volume 1, Kill or Die. This is essentially Avengers meets Hunger Games, or if you want to say Avengers meets Battle Royale. 16 Avengers find themselves facing against each other in an arena, where only one will end up surviving. This was a concept that I either thought was going to be epic or a big ol' fail, but I actually found myself in the middle with this one. Something that this comic does that I really loved is that each issue kind of delves deep into each Avenger. It focuses on each character and really provides a lot of nice character depth. A lot of the comics that I've read have never gone that far. Obviously, I'm still pretty new to comics, so there might be comics out there like this one, but it was really nice because I felt like I got to know each character really well. Another thing that I loved is how dark this comic book was willing to go. I will say that I think the downfall for this comic book was its plot. Also, I didn't necessarily love the direction of the plot. The Avengers pretty much have no choice but to kill each other, but this story doesn't necessarily follow along the same lines as something like the Hunger Games, where they revolt against this and they go against the government and try to take down the leader behind all this madness. I was kind of hoping that this would have that same direction, but that didn't end up happening. The Avengers just basically killed each other. Also, at times I felt that this comic book was a bit choppy, and I wanted it to get on a nice track, but that didn't end up happening. I did really enjoy the art style throughout this book. They definitely didn't shy away from showing all the gory and gruesome details that happen in the arena. I do think that I would want to end up reading the next volume if I'm able to find it, because it is a pretty entertaining read and I had a fun time reading it, so I might pick up the second volume if I'm able to find it. Next up, I read Ant-Man, Volume 1, Second Chance Man. This comic follows Scott Lang as he's given an opportunity by Iron Man. He faces up against the Taskmaster, and he's faced with a situation that hits a little too close to home. Unfortunately, I was a little bit underwhelmed with this first volume. I had picked this up after seeing the movie and loving it, and I didn't really enjoy it that much, unfortunately. It's a comic where I just felt like the plot was all over the place. It didn't necessarily have a main focus. I felt like towards the end it was starting to get somewhere, but overall it just was kind of messy. And some of the things that Scott Lang did within this comic book just made me want to bang my head against the wall. Because sometimes I felt like he was making some pretty foolish decisions and I was just like, what the heck you doing, Scott Lang? Get it together, brother! Also, I felt like there were some things that happened throughout this story that were just a little bit too convenient. Even though this volume doesn't leave you with everything resolved, and there's definitely room for like a second volume and whatnot, things still come together a little bit too nicely. I will say that the humor was great throughout this story, and I liked the appearances we see throughout this story. For example, Iron Man, what up bro, it's nice to see ya. Even though Iron Man and Ant-Man kind of have a little bit of a complicated relationship in this volume, it was still nice to see a familiar face, and I really enjoyed seeing the relationship between Scott Lang and his daughter, and how he would do literally anything for her. With all that being said though, I don't necessarily think that I'm going to be picking up the next volume. I just don't really know that I care enough to continue on with the next volume. If you guys have read the second volume though, and you think it's worth it, definitely let me know down below. Then I read The Fade Out Act 2, which I loved. It's so stinking good. I read Act 1 like over a year ago, I want to say, and I didn't enjoy it that much, but I loved Act 2. It got so much better in the second act. The only major issue that I had with this volume was the overall story structure. There were times when I did have a hard time following the story, but I was able to overlook that because I just loved everything that was happening. If you don't know what the series is about, it takes place in Hollywood in the 1940s on a film set. We follow an actress's suspicious death and a writer who's just completely unsettled by this death and kind of wants to uncover the mystery behind it. So you're basically spending your whole time reading this series just trying to figure out what the heck is going on. It's just such a fun series. Even though it's really dark, I probably shouldn't say it's fun necessarily, but it's just so mysterious and I love just trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And I found myself getting way more attached to the characters within this volume. In the first volume, I think that was like a big problem for me, is that I just wasn't attached to any of the characters, but I got so attached to them in this one, and I'm still loving the atmosphere of this comic. I just love that 1940s setting. And there are just so many things going on within this story that I love. And I am so eager to find out how it all comes to a close in the last volume. Then I read The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, The Parker Luck, and I have to say that I was quite disappointed with this volume. I didn't hate this necessarily, but I didn't love it like I thought that I would. And this is actually the first Spider-Man comic that I've ever read. I grew up loving the Spider-Man movies, but I had never read the comics, so I thought that I would really enjoy this, but I didn't really. So this story follows Peter Parker after he's kind of given like a second chance at his life after being mind swapped with Dr. Octopus. So he's back in his normal state now, but everything's completely different in his life, and so we kind of follow him trying to get his life back to normal. I feel like a big part of the reason why I didn't like this volume is because it kept making references to other things. It's like, if you want to know why this is the way it is, you have to read this comic. And it's like, no, I'm not gonna go read that comic just so I know what's happening in this scene. I didn't pay to read this comic only to have to read another comic. Am I the only one that feels that way? That's really one of the main things that I didn't love about this comic. There is one other thing that I just completely hated, and that was the insta-love in this comic. Like, I understand that there was kind of a little bit of reasoning behind it, but it also just was so unnecessary to me. I was just kind of like, why? But I did love the direction of the plot. I loved the characters, except for Peter Parker. Sometimes he kind of bugged me. He was a little bit dopey, which I will excuse that because it's been a while since he's been in his own mind. But still, sometimes I was just like, Peter, Parker, Parker, Parker. All in all, this wasn't a terrible comic. I enjoyed my time reading it. I'll definitely be picking up volume 2 and checking it out. And finally, I read Doctor Strange Season 1. I've had this for the longest time and just never got around to reading it, so I decided to pick it up and read it because the movie's coming out soon and I kind of wanted a little bit of a background on Doctor Strange. So this was kind of my first exposure to Doctor Strange, and I'm so glad that I picked this up because I ended up loving it. Now, I went and read reviews on this after I had finished it because I wanted to see what everybody else was thinking, because I left it being like, holy crap, that was so good. But then I read the reviews and people are so disappointed in this. So I don't know if I love this just because this is my first exposure with Doctor Strange, or maybe I just have bad taste in comics. I really hope that that's not the case. But I was just so pleasantly surprised by this comic. I loved the art, I loved the story, I loved the characters. And it was just really nice to have some exposure on Doctor Strange because I kind of went into this comic not knowing anything about him. I had seen the movie trailer, but that was it. This is the first exposure I've had to Doctor Strange. So you guys let me know down below if you have read this and if you hated it and why you hated it, and also a comic about Doctor Strange that you would recommend. So those are some of the recent comics that I have picked up and read. I think my favorite would have to be The Fade Out Act 2 as well as Doctor Strange Season 1. Those are two that I just really enjoyed. And I think that my least favorite would probably have to be Ant-Man, which is super sad because I was hoping that I would really enjoy it, but I just didn't necessarily like it that much. You guys should let me know down below if you have read any of these comics and what you thought of them. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these. Also, just let me know down below a comic that you read recently that you really enjoyed. If you like this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so click subscribe if you want to be notified for when I post new videos. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye, choo. What up, Reader fam? Today I am bringing you my October wrap-up.